Hey there, everybody. Happy Tuesday. So what I'm going to do today is go over some of the annotations that I hoped to see in our work from yesterday, as well as just some ideas of possible strategies you could use in the future. Um, so today there will be a copy of the document for everyone. Sorry, I forgot that step. So it led to some confusion. So it should be much smoother from this point forward. But again, most of you figured out what it was you were supposed to do. And if you weren't able to, you'll be able to do that today. So you'll be able to answer the first document while you move on to the second and third documents for today. So again, you're going to go to the classwork section and you're going to pull up your document. And so I'm just going to speak through my thought process when I'm annotating. Remember that vocabulary is key to understanding any text and truly comprehending that text. So if you're going through a document and you just glance over terms or ideas that you may have heard, but you don't have a solid understanding of that particular term, then you need to stop for a moment and you need to research what that term is. So whether it's a dictionary term or a term that is more of a political belief, you do have to take a moment to look that up because that could make or break your understanding of a text. So just keep that in mind. As I put together these texts, a lot of the times I do know the terms that are going to give us the most trouble. But again, my hope is that you take the time to figure out those definitions, figure out those terms, because that's how you learn, right? You're not going to have a teacher there or your classmates there supporting you along the way. So you've got to put in the work, and what better time than now, right? You're home and you have the time to do it. So let's get started. So again, I'm just going to read over this text again, but this time with my thought process as to what I wanted to annotate. And if you want to fast forward because you felt you did a solid job, I guess that's okay. But again, you should really think about the things that uh, go along with annotation. Again, it's the key to truly understanding a very difficult text. All right. So on June 12th, 1987, United States President Ronald Reagan delivered the Berlin Wall speech at the Brandenburg Gate in West Berlin. Once again, the capitalist, a more democratic side of Berlin in Germany. Reagan states, "And now the Soviets themselves may, in a limited way, be coming to understand the importance of freedom. We hear much from Moscow," you may want to note, in the USSR, in Russia, "about a new policy of reform or change," right? If you didn't know what reform means, you might want to write. It just means change, right? Usually in the government for the better. And openness. "Some political prisoners have been released. Certain foreign news broadcasts are no longer being jammed. Some economic enterprises or businesses have been permitted to operate with greater freedom from state control," remembering that the USSR was a totalitarian state. So there wasn't a lot of freedom for people or businesses to do what they wanted. It was whatever the government said is what went, and you didn't really get to ask questions, or you became a political prisoner. Are these the beginnings of a profound or large, massive change in the Soviet state? Right? Reagan sees that there's possible change in the USSR in the way it's being run. And remember, during this time period, the USSR and the United States, while they weren't actually physically fighting one another, they were causing lots of wars around the world, these proxy wars. And the idea that that could stop or that could end was really important to most people around the world. Everyone was afraid at this point that they were going to actually have a big fight. So again, the idea that this might end was appealing to Reagan and the rest of the world. Or are they token, right? Not meaningful gestures intended to raise false hopes in the West or to strengthen the Soviet government without changing it? We welcome change and openness, for we believe that the freedom and security go together, that the advance of human liberty or freedom can only strengthen the cause of world peace. There is one sign the Soviets can take or can make that would be unmistakable, that would advance dramatically the cause of freedom and peace. General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity or wealth for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, economic, political freedom, come here to this gate, Mr. Gorbachev. Open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Right? And if you have forgotten what the wall is, again, you might want to remember that it was a physical wall that separated the east and the west of Berlin. Very small city, and it separated families. It separated families that had always lived together, but maybe one day they woke up and this wall was being built. Families that had been close knit, had been able to see each other every day. They lost that freedom. So again, the idea that that wall would be torn down was appealing because it would be a symbol of this painful time period in history finally ending. I understand the fear of war and the pain of division that afflict or cause suffering and trouble this continent, right? Because you have to remember that Europe had suffered greatly during World War I and then not too long after World War II. And then they were in the midst of this Cold War. So Europe as a continent had suffered generation after generation after generation. And I pledge to you my country's efforts to help overcome these burdens. To be sure, we in the West, right, that's Western Europe, that's the United States, must resist Soviet expansion or the expansion of communism. So we must maintain defenses of unassailable or unbeatable strength. Yet we seek peace, so we must strive to reduce arms or weapons on both sides. Right? The idea was that if they could finally find peace between the two, then the world would sort of breathe a sigh of relief because the world was on edge thinking that these nuclear powerhouses were going to go head to head. But Reagan makes it clear that, right, while they didn't want to fight, in order to stop this spreading of communism, they were prepared to fight. Right, so I think that we have a sort of understanding of the speech itself and the purpose behind the speech. So remember, when a question asks you for two parts, you must answer both parts. So what I noticed in a lot of our submissions of work, we sort of just answered the first part. What did Reagan want Gorbachev to do? And if the answer is easy. He wanted him to tear down the wall to promote peace and end the Cold War. Sure, but again, that was pretty clear. That's not the most important part of this question. The most important part is the why. Why is it so important that this one little city, that this one wall be torn down? And so the Berlin Wall separated this small city into two opposing ideologies. And if you don't know what that term is, I gave you a little snippet of it here. But again, it's tearing down the wall that it's going to be the clearest sign of unity between the East and the West, between those who are communist and those who are capitalist. And ultimately, for the world, it would mean that there wouldn't be this tense feeling that at any moment they were going to go to war and use their nuclear weapons, that the world had seen in action at the end of World War II and knew that in a moment, as you saw in the video that Mr. Wenz had posted, about the possible impact of a nuclear war, tearing down this wall would have meant that the world would see that we were all on the mend. We were all going to start working together in order to stop this from happening. So my hope is that as you go through these texts, you take the time to dissect these texts. I'm not going to bombard you with readings upon readings, but I will expect that as you go through these readings, you're being very meticulous or careful about understanding the short readings that I give you. 35 minutes is not a long time to do 3 or 4 pages worth of reading, but it is enough time to comb through the readings that I do give you in order to truly understand it. Vocabulary is sort of, for me, a make or break kind of thing. If you do not understand the words that you are reading, then you will not understand the reading, and the whole idea of reading it is pointless. So take this time. I'm going to ask that you use the next 35 minutes to do what I did for document 1 and what some of you did for document 1 yesterday. I saw some very well annotated works, and you're going to do the same for document 2. Document 3 is an image, so it's not the same, and you're going to answer the questions that go along with this. So my hope is that we all get better at annotating. If you're not great at it yet, that's fine. That's what we're going to use this time to do. So please take the next few moments of class and work through these next 2 documents. And again, if you have any questions along the way, just comment. I'll be on the other side of the computer